Okay, this is John Robb here with the latest interview of what people are doing in the lockdown for Underground Shoes. And today's interview was with Peter Hooton, the singer from The Farm, and several other things as well. So, Peter, how's lockdown treating you?
Sorry?
How's lockdown treating you, Peter?
It's just the same as my normal life, really, apart from not being able to go to concerts and football. But I've been locked down for 20 odd years. So, I mean, my day isn't that much different because I've always worked at home anyway. You know, last few years I've been doing various things, like I've written a couple of books, you know, and so you get used to staying at home, staring into the internet and staring into the abyss. But what it has done, it's made me realise the small things in life, you know, like just going out, and I go out a couple of times a day. Oh, sorry, once a day. If the government are watching, once a day I go with the dog, you know, and I go on long walks. And we're quite near the beach, you know, so Crosby Beach, and it's absolutely beautiful down there. So you'd usually go there maybe once a month in normal times, but now I'm there nearly every day, you know. It's close proximity. I've also decided to start cutting the lawn, you know, and doing a bit of gardening.
Getting desperate now, yeah.
You know, rock and roll. But I've also been able to catch up on things like a bit of reading, you know. But as I say, the main difference is I'd go to the shops every day because I love going to shops, and I don't do that now. I go for like maybe one or two big shops a week with me mask on, you know.
Yeah. So, like, we're going to talk about the cultural items to get you through this, but one of the first things I want to talk about before we get there is because you're very well involved in Liverpool, the sports associations, etc. I mean, this will be mainly a cultural thing, but what about what's going on with football at the moment? I mean, I see, like everything, it's completely paralysed, isn't it? I mean, what's the people in your circles take on the situation, and maybe Liverpool's Premiership?
Yeah, well, I haven't really, honestly, to tell you the truth, I mean, even though we were only a couple of weeks from winning the league, I haven't really thought about it much, because when I was saying at the beginning of March, you know, we won't finish this league, and we didn't think, you know, I didn't think it would, because I'd done a bit of research. I'd looked into what was happening in Wuhan, and I was following John Ashton, the public health expert, who's been absolutely brilliant. But as soon as he got him on the telly on Question Time and Newsnight, they got him off as soon as, because they were uncomfortable truths, really. And there's also the editor of The Lancet, Richard Hooton, who's very good as well. So I was telling people, I said, we won't finish this league, and everyone's going, oh, shut up, what are you on about? You're a pessimist and all that. But I knew what was coming, you see, because as soon as Wuhan did a proper lockdown, and there was some brilliant things. I posted a few of them, but Channel 4 News, which is the best news on the television by a long way, they did lockdown from Wuhan, about a 10-minute, 15-minute, like a documentary with a student who'd come back from England, I think, who's with a grandmother and a mother in the lockdown, and it was completely different to our lockdown. Our lockdown is a very British lockdown, isn't it? It's like, please don't go out, but we're not going to enforce it, you know. Hence the 5 million parties in Manchester over the last few weeks, you know.
They're not stopped. I mean, it's funny how you mentioned Dad's Army before, because you realise if you ever want to know anything about what this country's really like, watch an episode of Dad's Army.
Dad's Army, it is, yeah. Well, my dad's
off the street, yeah.
My dad's like, you know, my dad's in self-isolation, and he thinks it's the war. And when I said to him, well, it's terrible, isn't it? Everyone's got to stay in. He said, well, it was like that in the war, you know, and it becomes like, and he said, well, at least you're not getting bombed. You know, he's completely he's zoned in. He's not going out. I'm taking him shopping now and again, you know, but he came to the door the other day to pick up his shopping from the doorstep, dressed like an Italian ultra. He had a scarf around his face. You know, my dad's in his 90s, you know, so he's obviously susceptible. Yeah. But he's dead philosophical about it, and I think, you know, when he sees stuff on the telly, you know, he's very cynical about it all, you know. But you know, it's funny in a way, because that generation, you know, he was a kid when they were getting bombed, and he got evacuated, I think, you know. So I mean, it's totally, if they've lived through that, this is nothing, is it really? You know, you can still go to shops. The only thing you can't do is, I mean, you can't go to the pub, or you can't go to a concert, or you can't go to football, you know, but, you know, I mean, for a few weeks, you know, I mean, I don't think it's, you know, it's not that bad, is it?
Yeah, maybe a year, but we'll get it back in the end.
Maybe a year.
It could be a long time.
It could be, yeah. But I think what they'll do, what they'll do is they'll relax it a bit and then put it back on. I think that's what will happen, you know. In terms of football, as I say, I haven't really felt, you know, the one thing I do miss, we used to play football with every Friday, and it started off a few years ago, and Blackie from Arkman Biscuit was there, and various other people, and it's a social occasion, you know, and then Blackie stopped playing because he's got an arthritic toe.
Yeah.
But that could be a great song for Arkman Biscuit, couldn't it? But he comes to the pub afterwards, and it's worth going over to Birkenhead just to be with Blackie for an hour, because he'll go on about the strangest things ever. The last time I was in conversation with him, he was talking about Cheshire executions of the 17th century, and he's an expert on it.
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
No.
So, in a way, do you wish Liverpool were just 1 point clear at the top?
I don't, honestly, people might say, oh, you know, I don't think football is, I think Jurgen Klopp was perfect, his statement about it. Football's insignificant. It's the most significant thing of the insignificant things, you know. And it's really about where it hits home. When there was a brilliant piece on Channel 4, Hillsborough anniversary, and there was a lad who's photographed, I don't know if you saw it, and he was photographed from Hillsborough, where he's at the Leppins Lane, and he's got his head in his hands and that. And he passed away a few days ago. He was 65. He probably thought, well, it won't affect me. I'm, you know, pretty fit. That's what his family was saying, that he didn't think it would affect him. And in my local station, Crosby Station, the station masters passed away as well. And it's when you hear about things like that, because I knew him I used to see him every day, because the one thing I loved doing was going into town and having meetings and you realise now, there were meetings for meeting's sake half the time, you know, because nothing much has changed. You still do it on Zoom, you know.
Yeah, it takes less time, but the actual travel there is the best bit most of the time, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, I love getting on trains, and but the thing is, you know, you can get on your bike now, can't you? And it's coming into the spring, summer, so, you know, I think we're lucky that it's not October, November. I think that's when depression would have really set in, you know.
I was thinking that the weather's actually making, even though you can't really go out in it that much, it's making it feel better. Yeah.
No. I hope the governments are tracking your movements.
Like they've got nothing better to do.
You seem to be jogging all the time.
I've got a secret route. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Don't go in the parks. That's my tip. Just run down the dual carriageways. You get them all to yourself.
Yeah.
So culture that's getting you through this. So first music. So have you found you're going back to the music you listened to when you were younger to go to a space, or?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And you know, it's one of those things. It's a toss up for me, because I mean the first real albums that I loved were XTC, The Clash, the first album, All Mod Cons by The Jam, the first Specials album, and that. But really, if I really go back to it, and because of the weather as well, it's got to be the Stone Roses debut album, you know. And I think not only because they were heavily involved in the Justice Tonight tour, but when in this type of weather, if you're just lazing around in the garden and all that, it's the perfect album, you know. And I think I've just listened to it again before. It's perfection. And I remember buying it when it was 89, it came out, wasn't it? I remember buying it, and I had a car with a cassette player, and remember them. So I used to stick it in. I was thinking, because there was all the hype in the NME and the melody and the sounds about Manchester and the Stone Roses and all that, I didn't want to like it, if you know what I mean. Yeah. You know, I was like pretty open-minded, but I was thinking, it can't be that good. It can't be as good as the Birds. It can't be as good, you know, do you know what I mean? It can't be as good as Love. And then I put it on, and I thought, I listened to it a few times, well, I wish John Leckie had produced us, you know. He's just absolute genius, you know.
Oh, he did it.
And it's still, sorry.
Yeah, well, Lecky was brilliant. Very key parts in that record, wasn't he? Yeah. Yeah, as you say, the record still stands the test of time after 31 years.
Oh, and when we heard it live so many times on the Justice Tonight tour and in Hooton Park, you know, it was like it was a spiritual experience. That's the only way I could describe it as, and that's never happened to me often in my life. When I met Bill Shankly once, that I felt the same as when you listen to the Stone Roses, if you know what I mean. It was like I'd been brought up a Catholic, and every time the Catholic Church had told you you're going to feel, you know, you're doing your first Holy Communion, you're doing your first confession, I thought I'd feel different, but I didn't. I never did, and it was like a big disappointment to me. It's like finding out Father Christmas didn't exist, you know. But when you listen to that album, when you know, it's just, it's mind blowing. It's mind blowing.
It's interesting you mentioned the Justice Tonight tour there, because yesterday was the Hillsborough day.
Yeah.
It'd be good to get some thoughts on that, what that day was like. What was it like having that day in the middle of all of this, and also some recollections of that tour and playing with the Roses?
It was very strange, the Hillsborough anniversary this year, because there was no gathering of people. Because for 30 years, people had gathered, you know, after to commemorate it, and I think it's a social thing that people want to be with people who'd been there and witnessed it, because as an eyewitness to it, it's traumatic, you know, and I don't think on the day, and it didn't really hit it, maybe it is post-traumatic stress, I don't know, but I went out, I was at Hillsborough, and I couldn't really gather the enormity of it until I went back to the car and started seeing the figures going up, because I didn't think, you know, we didn't know anyone had died. Even when we were on the pitch, we didn't know anyone had died. We thought they'd be getting taken to the other end of the pitch to get resuscitated, you know, thought they'd fainted or collapsed or whatever. So it wasn't really until I got home, and that night I'd always remember. I remember my mum. I rung my mum up, and she said, "Oh, John Peel's been on the phone. He wants to know if you're all right." You know, and that's when it hit me. We didn't know the death toll then. But I went out in the night time into Liverpool city centre. It was all a bit of a blur. It wasn't until the next day, really, when you wake up and you turn the news on. And I think when I turned the news on, John Ashton was on the news. He was portraying exactly what we felt as supporters, the helplessness, the fact that Liverpool fans had initiated and conducted the rescue operation. And that's what Justice Taylor said. He said Liverpool fans on the day were magnificent. So for 2 or 3 days, there was this narrative. The fans were heroes. Then you get the Sun headline, obviously the dark forces in the South Yorkshire police had conspired and thought, we're going to get the blame for this. And, you know, the fans are going to... So they changed the narrative by using the mechanisms they knew through the mass media, you know. But every year I've been to the memorials, and it was strange this year. There was one, we went to one in Waterloo, which is just near Crosby, and there's a little, there's a memorial stone there, and it's for the people who died in Sefton. Sefton's a borough of Merseyside, you know, and it's for people the residents of Sefton who died, so there's probably about 20, 30 names on it. And we just gathered there. So I was there with Mick Potter, my old mate, who used to do the end with us, and Tony McClelland, who used to do the end with us. Social distancing, there's about 15 of us there, but we just stood in silence really, and then had a little chat afterwards and went away, you know. So it was very strange, very strange.
The tour itself, was that an attempt to come to terms? I mean, obviously it was a political thing, because the voice had to be made, the empowerment for people through music. That's all important. It was also a personal coming to terms with it as well.
Yeah, I think there being certain things. I mean, the Justice Tonight tour was really spontaneous. You know, it was originally Don't Buy the Sun gig in Liverpool, which we got people to do, and then Davo, who's my mate, who's also in a big audio, but he's also the roadie for the Stone Roses, guitar roadie for the Stone Roses, Max Street Peaches, all different groups. You know, he's well known. never likes to put himself forward but it wasn't me who organised it as such. In many ways, it was Davo. I had the original idea for Don't Buy the Sun concert because it was just after the News of the World collapsed. So I thought at the time the Sun was looking susceptible as well. So we had a bit of a rally, and it was almost like an 80s rally where you had political speakers on, you had music, and you had various people, and it was the atmosphere in the Olympia that night. If you could have bottled it up, it was absolutely fantastic, you know. So the next day, it was Mick Jones was in a cafe with us and went, "We've got to do this again." That's me, Mick Jones' impression of anyone. And we said, "What do you mean?" He went, "We've got to take this on the road," you know. And he thought, "Oh, you know, that seems a good idea," but didn't know how he would do it. But when Mick Jones, Mick was like the Pied Piper. So he got in touch with SJM, Simon Moran, and said, "Will you promote it?" And they said, "Yeah, no problem." And then a few dates were put up. But in every town, when we started off in Cardiff, James Dean Bradfield from the Manics got up and sang with us. Then we went to Manchester, second night, and it was all hush-hush, but it was John Squire and Ian Brown got up. And you know, John, because you were the compere, don't you? And you also, one of the highlights of the show was you doing Janie Jones and jumping into the audience. I mean, I'm not sure what the Membranes crowds are like. But sometimes if you play with the Membranes, if you jump into the audience, you're going to break your neck, aren't you? Sorry about that, John.
No, it's true. So speaking of Mick, kind of brings us back around. I guess you must have been listening to a bit of Clash this period, because the Clash are probably the most formative band on you, I'm guessing here.
Yeah, I mean, I loved everything about the Clash, even though stylistically I was probably nearer to the Jam. But for me, Strummer, his lyrics were like, you know, they were an education. You know, when he started writing about stuff, say he wrote about Spanish bombs, you know, and you'd start reading about the Spanish Civil War. He'd write about Something About England, which was a brilliant anti-war track. It's on Sandinista. And that really inspired me to write All Together Now, you know, No Man's Land originally, you know. So when you used to, Strummer's lyrics were like essays. They were like essays on real life, but also about historical stuff, you know. So when Sandinista come out, I started reading all about, you know, the Sandinistas and what it meant, and I think there was people like Grant Fleming, the photographer from. I just made up a new word there for photographist. The photographer, he was actually in the ICF, wasn't he? He was a West Ham fan. Bit of a hooligan, but the Clash changed his life, I think. And he went over to Nicaragua and started taking photographs, and then he ended up going all around the world, different locations. And he's a great lad, Grant, you know, and I think it did change people's lives, you know, it did. I went to Paris in '81 because I'd been to Paris for the European Cup final with Liverpool, but everyone I was with, they weren't really interested in going to various places. You know, I wanted to go and see Versailles because I've always been interested in history. But everyone I was with were just saying, "No, we want to go to sports shops and see." You know, so what I decided to do, that was the May. What I decided to do was I'm going to go back in September. So I went back and stayed in the same hotel with a few mates in there, and I hadn't gone specifically to see the Clash. But I'd seen in the NME the week before, the Clash are playing 7 nights with The Beat and Wahid. So luckily for me, I thought I went to the Mogador Theatre, and it was round the corner from our hotel. It was just all fate. And then I tried to get in during the sound check times, thinking I'll see if I can blag a pass for tonight or something. And this fella stopped me, said, "All right, are you with Wiley?" I went, No. He said, I said, "Who are you?" He said, I'm the tour manager for the Clash. Are you from Liverpool? I went, yeah. He said, so am I. Who do you support? I said, Liverpool. He went, do you want a pass for tonight? And that's how it happened. So I went to see. They were on for 7 nights.
Yeah.
But I went to see them for 4 nights. Then I had the 5th night off because I wanted to look forward to the next 2 nights. Maybe I was thinking about it too much.
Yeah, you regret it now.
But I didn't do the 7 nights. I only did the 6 nights. But they were absolutely brilliant. And everyone thought it was with Wiley, you see. They thought I was one of his roadies or one of his helpers or one of his people. But so I was always in the dressing room with the Clash. I always remember I got in the Clash's dressing room and there was like all the rider was there. There was all the drinks, the whiskey, the vodka, the beer, but also a big display of fruit, bananas and all, sandwiches and all that. I've never seen anything like it. So I got a banana, I started eating a banana, and the Clash came in, Joe Strummer and Mick Jones, and I went, oh, sorry about this, lads. I was eating one of the bananas and that. And I went, dude, help yourself, we're the Clash. You take what you want. And I thought, every other group, 90% of groups would have gone ballistic and kicked you out. I thought that was always in my mind when we were always touring. They were always trying to bunk people in through the windows, the Clash. Yeah. And that was our idea, that we were always trying to do that. And if people had the ingenuity to get into the dressing room, we'd never go, who are these, kick them out and So it was interesting times,
What do you reckon Joe would have made of these times, politically and virusly?
Joe would have been a big campaigner, wouldn't he? Let's face it. I think he would have been a massive campaigner. And I think he would have been very, very outspoken. I think very vociferous. He was still up until when he passed away. I think one of his last gigs was for the Fire Brigade Union, wasn't it? Mm. So I think he would have come into his own, I think, in these times, because I think he would have been very outspoken. I think he would have been, a lot of groups in years gone by. So you shouldn't be political. You're going to destroy your career. Marky Smith told me that. He said we did something for the NME in '91. I think it was Paul Hooton, me and Marky Smith and a couple of other people. And Marky Smith, he called to him, they're going to get you, Pete. They're going to get you. I said, what are you on about? He said, you're too political. You're trying to, they won't like it. They won't like it. And I think in many respects, we were always trying to, say for the NME, we took Andrew Collins to Robert Tressel's grave, who wrote the Ragged Child Philanthropist. Mm. And that was one of the NME. So at the time, the NME were just fascinated with how many ecstasies groups had taken or how many drugs they'd take. So we were trying to steer them away from that. Mm. And Andrew Collins now, he says that's one of the best interviews you've ever had. But at the time in the NME, it wasn't proclaimed as one of the best interviews. It was buried a little bit because it didn't fit in with the editorial, So
speaking of books, you've been much reading.
Yeah, I've done a lot of reading recently. I've got a few that I read earlier. Like, this is a very good book, and I did a tour with the author Simon Hughes. This is about Liverpool versus Thatcher, really. Mm-hmm. Liverpool versus Margaret Thatcher, and we did a few talks around the country. Mainly Liverpool, but we also went to Dublin, believe it or not. And in Dublin, we had about 70 or 80 people there. I interviewed Simon about Liverpool in the 80s, even though Simon was only born in the 80s. But he's done some brilliant research for the book. And it was really about the changing scene in Liverpool in the 80s, because before the 80s, drugs didn't really exist, did they? There was people were smoking pot in the 70s maybe, but early 80s, but heroin didn't exist. And so it was a very important research that Simon's done about the heroin explosion in Liverpool, and how it was allowed to happen.
Riots.
Yeah, post-riots. Now, I wrote one of our songs called Minders about that, because I've always had my suspicions that from Liverpool being a big, lots of young people smoke cannabis and into Bob Marley and all that. All of a sudden, heroin was everywhere. And obviously, it's not just Liverpool. It was in Edinburgh as well. It was in South London. But it didn't seem to hit Manchester or Leeds and Newcastle as quickly as it did Liverpool. Maybe because Liverpool was a port, Maybe that's the real reason, because it was a port. But it spread like wildfire through Liverpool. And I was youth worker at the time, and I also remember people tooting it in the pubs, and I was going, "That's heroin, And they go, "Oh, no, it's not, it's smack." "Oh, no, smack is heroin." Saatchi couldn't have done a better campaign than Liverpool drug dealers, because everyone was convinced you could control it. Everyone was convinced that it was smack. It wasn't really heroin, because everyone had seen the film like Christian F. And heroin was all about Amsterdam and people injecting it. Liverpool never became a city that was, and loads of scallies got into it, and it was like, I always think after the riots, it was a way of social control. You can't really ever prove that, but Simon uncovers a great testimony, and it was in one of the reports done by the government at the time, and there's a policeman, the Gifford report, I think it was called, and one of the policemen says that they were definitely told, he's passed away now, this policeman, but Simon uncovers it, and he was told by a community worker in Toxteth called Joe Farag, who was also an Evertonian, a black lad, one of the very few lads from the black community ever went to Everton. And Joe tipped Simon off about this Gifford report, and he finds the extracts in it where he says, we were told to more or less turn a blind eye to heroin, and it's in there. It's never made the headlines because it's all been a bit buried, I think,
So how do Liverpool recover from that? Because it's a very different city now than it was in the 80s. And it
is a very different city. Yeah, I think creatively, though, in the 80s, Liverpool was booming. And I think that becomes, because of mass unemployment, people become creative. Same way as this virus now. People are becoming creative, aren't they? They're doing things they've never done before. They're writing poetry. People are getting on the internet singing. I mean, that's the one thing that's getting on my nerves. Every time you go onto Facebook, someone's doing another song, and people. Sorry?
Leave it to the professionals.
Well, no, I'm not saying that, but I just think, come on, do something, do a bit of magic or something. Fire eating. Do we really want to hear 7-year-old kids singing? Look at our Billy, or look at our Chelsea singing this. I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit cynical, but I think it's great that people are becoming creative and doing things, and people, you see people writing. People. I mean, I'm actually keeping a diary. I don't know if it's going to be of any use to anyone, but I thought it's such a historic time. My dad said he's keeping a diary. So I thought, if he's keeping one, I better keep one as well, to see if his correlates to mine.
10 o'clock, I got up. 11, I took the dog out for a walk. Rest of the day, sat about.
Have you read my diary?
I was going to say, that's what the diary is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Full of mundanity, hard, isn't it?
What's that?
It's almost like that. What do they always say about evil? Is it the mundanity of evil or something? That thing that bad shit's going on, but we're all just sat around with nothing going on. Yeah. Yeah. It's the what they always say. From one powerful thing from the concentration camps was that it was the indifference, wasn't it, of like evil. The fact that it was routine. It became a routine for like the wardens in concentration camps. The brutality of it was almost like regimented. There was no emotion there. Far more.
I mean, my diary's not going to be like that. By the way. I mean, because what have we got to put up with? We got to sit. I mean. The one thing that does get on my nerves a little bit is that, the press. I've stopped watching the press conferences because the banality of the questions. Piers Morgan, who'd ever thought this? Piers Morgan's doing a better job than the political commentators. You know, it's absolutely ridiculous.
It is completely mental. Everything's gone upside down, hasn't it?
Yeah. You know,
I think the Tories are still the Tories.
Yeah, you know, I think a lot of people say, "Oh, you can't be political now." But the reason that the NHS is in the state it is, and social care, which is the real big killer, social care at the moment, and there's a nursing home near to us where 8 people died in the last few days, and there's another one in Liverpool where 13 died. That's going to be the big killer, and that's the undetected killer, really, because those figures aren't really getting highlighted, are they? They've almost been left to their own devices, haven't they? Yeah. Which I think is one of the biggest tragedies, because because old age pensions home, it's mainly privately owned, aren't they? I think the governments have, they're very late coming to it, and I think Alex Thompson, he's a brilliant journalist from Channel 4 News. He asked a great question yesterday. Of course, Hancock didn't answer it because he's never answered one, has he? No. It's just like a party political broadcast. I like watching the New York governor Cuomo. He's brilliant. I mean, Trump's are brilliant in a different way because they're so funny. Because they're so contradictory. And then they say, I was onto this. And then someone said, wait there. You called it this, and they'll give the date and the time he said it, and then you're fake. It's unbelievable.
If it wasn't important, then it'd be hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, I think, wasn't he saying he was going to stop the lockdown now, and then the governor said, you can't do that. We're in control of New York and Washington and Los Angeles. And, there's a big debate on that now. But I think the one thing about this crisis is really highlighted. And, the NHS have been doing a brilliant job, and the clapping at 8 o'clock every Thursday is fantastic. But really, it's highlighted social care. And Andy Burnham, Metro Mayor for Manchester, has been going on about for years. The social care is the big gap, because that's just been left over the years. And really, the NHS has been, because it's been privatised so much and gone to various factions. It's, there's no real, if they're saying all this equipment's going out, centralised, they might have millions, but it's not getting to certain places. And I think that's the decentralisation. I think it would be a lot better, if, as John Ashton say, if like Merseyside and Manchester and places like that had their own stocks and were able to deal with them themselves, to deal with the local need. I think that's being highlighted. Also, I'm not too keen on this is probably not a popular opinion, but I don't like charities for the NHS, because, as you know, John, we tried to do, after the Justice Tonight tour, we tried to do an NHS, support the NHS tour with the Justice Tonight band, and asked various other bands to get involved, but it wasn't really a cause celeb then, but that wasn't a fundraiser for the NHS. That was an awareness raising thing for the NHS. The NHS should not be a charity. And the very fact that people are raising money for it, it doesn't sit right with me. Because Matt Hancock has already said, money's no object for the NHS. So the fact that people are raising money for the NHS, it's a good knee-jerk reaction. And I can see why people are doing it. But in the long term, it's not a good political solution. It's not a political solution. But, what governments should be saying is, look, in our manifesto, we will put 2 pence on income tax, but we'll ring fence it to go to the NHS. And I think that'll be a vote winner. But a lot of parties won't do that because they think increased taxes is about loser, But come on, I think most people now would realise that something like ring fencing that for NHS and social care would be a vote winner.
Well, that sort of kind of brings me to another question, really. Are you an optimistic person about the post-virus world? Do you think people now will embrace the NHS, social care, or do you think we'll just carry on with the Trump race to the bottom, or a mixture of the two?
I'm an optimist, so I think they will. I think they really will, because I think, I think this going on to the doorsteps, it's about community awareness. And one thing Thatcher said, And I said this after the Hillsborough inquest results in 2016. She said there was no such thing as society. It was always the individual. And even Boris Johnson, who's a big, he was a big advocate of Thatcher's policies, and you would say he was, in terms of lineage, he was the manifestation of Thatcher's politics, But even he said before he went into intensive care, didn't he? He said it's proved that there is such thing as society. So you never know. Maybe he'll even change his, maybe they will start looking at the NHS and thinking we've got to do something. We've got to do something in terms of funding, because if you look at, people say, and Matt Hancock's quite right, we've never spent more on the NHS. They haven't. But in real terms, it's been a drop, because you've got to look at the percentage of GDP. That's what it's all based on. And when the Tories get in, from when Labour are in, when it's on a trajectory, when the Tories get in, it always goes to deflatten the curve, if you know what I mean. If that's a trendy thing to say nowadays, flatten the curve. Well, that's exactly what happens when the Tories come in real terms, because privatisation, even though it's only 10%, but 10% is still a massive, massive amount of money,
So you talk about Channel 4 News before. You watching quite a lot of TV? You doing box set binges like some people, or you were news?
Yeah, When They See Us, I've watched that recently, about the Central Park 5. Have you seen that?
No, what it is though. Yes.
It's absolutely brilliant. It's heartbreaking. With someone stitched up, and talking about Trump, he was one of the people who was advocating bringing back the death penalty for them, and they were just 5 innocent lads in Central Park on the wrong place, the wrong time. It's all come out now what had happened, but that's a brilliant. If anyone wants to see something, I'd highly recommend that. And at the moment, I'm watching Ozark, which I think is fantastic as well. A brilliant script. But I always watch these American things on Netflix with the subtitles on, because some people say, it's not that good. But if you're seeing the subtitles and seeing exactly what the script is, the script's very clever. It's very, I'm into series 2 now, and I think in a way it draws us together as a family in a way, because we're watching it together. Because we've never done that in the past, unless it's Christmas or whatever. So we're watching it together, and it's every night. I've got a strict rule of between Thursday and Sunday, I call that the weekend. And I'll have a glass of wine or a bottle of beer, but I won't drink from Monday to Thursday, because I think you've got to have some discipline in your life.
Yeah,
well, Thursday to Sunday, yeah. And obviously it's over the recommended units, but when you think of the virus, you think, fuck it, I could get the virus tomorrow, but hopefully with things like this, F-suit Millwall. Millwall. See, I never thought I'd wear something like that, but most people are wearing in the shops. Most people are wearing them, and it becomes second nature. Now I don't even know if it does any good. Sorry.
It's good and bad, because it's good because it stops some of the bugs getting through, but it's bad because people put their hands on the face all the time. Yeah.
The one thing is, I've noticed you haven't done it very much here, but people put their hands on the face all the time. If you did a big meeting, Zoom meeting, I've done a couple. And people forever scratching themselves.
It's a really, you don't notice how much you do it till you realise you're not meant to be doing it.
We're basically monkeys, aren't we?
Yeah, of course, yeah. That's weird when people can't understand why we catch diseases off animals, because they think we're not animals.
Yeah.
So, have you been creative in this period at all, or you just?
I'd say that I've done a couple of things with Keith Mullen. We've met on Zoom, and he's done a few chords, and but all very, we haven't had anything now for 20 odd years. We're not going to start now, I don't think. But
album then in the downtime.
we've got we've got an album full of songs there if we ever get round to doing it, But I think the great thing is, you can do that through Zoom. So we'll play a few chords. I'll record it on my phone and go away and work on it, But I wouldn't say it was. I wouldn't say we were. we did a thing the other night with Twitter for Shine On. I enjoyed doing that, but it's hard to keep up those Twitter listening parties. They're called. It's hard to keep up on Twitter because there's so many. Have you done one?
Not done one, yeah, but I've kind of jumped in on a few when they've been there. I know Chris Packhams, who does his punk records.
Yeah.
And some of Tim's have been on as well, just chipping some stuff in.
Yeah. I mean, they did one with New Order the other night, didn't he?
It'd been great. He's great, Tim. He's a great curator.
Yeah.
I'm a fan. Yeah. So, speaking of that, actually, the internet as well. Using the internet a lot, using it more or a different way.
Very similar, really, but try and keep. There's my doorbell, John, and I've just seen the fella. Shall I take it?
Yeah. Well, that's all the stuff I need, actually, Peter. So I can get off.
No, I've got more. I've got the Beastie Boys book.
Well, just go quick. Yeah.
This is a brilliant book, Adam Hochschild, about the First World War. Absolutely brilliant, and really things haven't changed that much because the people who were sending people over the top in the First World War were mainly Etonians. They didn't care about the working class. They weren't active, and it's a brilliant book because it looks at the class structure in the British Army and how that they weren't concerned about people's welfare. No.
Well, war is peak capitalism, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's their dream, isn't it? So, okay, Peter. Well, that's cool. That's all.
Okay, brilliant.
Thanks for your time. Because I know the door these days is a complicated procedure.
You know what it is? Yeah. You know what's arriving? Me lawnmower.
Lawnmower.
And I think I'll have to prove this.
Cool. Let's go and have a look.
Let's have a look.
Mask on.
Yeah. All right. What is it? Lawnmower?
It looks like.
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
Has it just arrived in a box?
It's what?
It just arrived in a box.
It's just arrived in a box. Yeah. I've gone for the real exercise one. The one that isn't petrol or electric. It's an actual handheld.
Yeah.
Old-fashioned one.
Yeah.
I've gone for that. Let's go in, and this is our other room. There's a few things there. See that there?
Yeah.
One of our first gigs with Simon Moran.
Yeah.
And you see it there?
Was that the Boardwalk one, or was that another one?
No, that was Sheffield University. But Simon sent that. I think it was just around about Christmas. Yeah, he sent me that. It was his first gig he'd ever promoted. SJM Empire.
I saw you at the Boardwalk on that tour, that period.
Oh yeah, that's when the Mondays all turned up, I think.
Yeah, I was with Simon.
And Gaz Whelan was talking about that the other day on Twitter to me. I mean, that's at the time we were a bit taken aback because they all come jumping into the dressing room with cricket hats on and going, all right, scouts. We thought, this is a setup. They're going to take us to a pub. There's going to be a mob waiting for us. But they were ahead of the game, the Mondays.
Yeah.
They were ahead of the game. There's no doubt about that. And they were like, ever since we got involved with them. Even though the press did try and
stir it.
It was absolute nonsense. Because it's like in London. Big Audio Dynamite. And flowered up. We were always when we had to London, we were always embraced. Music unites, doesn't it?
All the time. Well, Liverpool and Manchester always joined together from punk.
Yeah, I mean, Factory Records was going to be. I mean, before that, it was Zoo Records, wasn't it? I think Tony Russ was going to start up a label with Roger Eagle, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And it was going to be a Northwest label. Well, so just imagine how the music might have been.
Roger was a link, wasn't he? Manchester to Liverpool.
Yeah. Twisted Wheel and that, yeah.
Yeah. His history's fantastic, isn't it? So, right, all right, Peter. Well, that was
okay, brilliant.
So your lawnmower has arrived.
Rock and roll.
And I'll
see. At least I'll be listening. I'll be doing it. And because it's not electric or petrol, I can have me earphones in, listening to the Membranes.
Well, that'll be a very fast cut of the lawn. That'll be, yeah. What is this horrible fucking racket? Yeah. Cool. All right.
You're on Spotify, though, aren't you?
Yeah.
I'll have a look.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't pay much. They don't pay much at all. Isn't it something like 0.003 pence a stream or something? You've got to have about 1 million streams before you.
At least they pay you something.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah. Even if it's shit. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll see you on the other side then.
Yeah. Hopefully.
All right, Peter. Nice one.
See you, John. Thanks a lot.